Welcome to episode 81 of Wirecast Live. Good to see you guys, everybody. We are back on our weekly schedule. We're live here every Thursday at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time on Facebook, YouTube, and usually Periscope, but probably not today. Welcome. We're going to be talking about live streaming on a budget, and we've got some great Wirecast news for you coming up. Stick around. It's going to be a great show. Welcome to Wirecast Live. Hey everybody, welcome to Wirecast Live. I didn't realize I was live. I didn't get counted down. That's okay. We've got our guests back on, and we have some great Wirecast news. So first of all, if you were curious and you weren't watching your email, you didn't know what was going on, you haven't been watching our social media channels, Wirecast 9 dropped. It dropped yesterday. It's out. Wirecast 9 is available. You can go get it right now. You should have gotten an in-app ping for it, letting you know a new version is available. If you've been around on Wirecast 7 or earlier, that's probably not news to you, since obviously we've had quite a few updates since then. But it is a kind of a big deal. There's some great new features that we've got that this version brings to the table. We've continued to expand the production capabilities of Wirecast Live, or Wirecast, and the Wirecast Pro side of things. So just a few of the highlight ones we can talk about, but let's go over them now. So first of all, Wirecast 9, what does it bring to the table? First thing you've got is PTZ optics support and PTZ control in Wirecast 9. So if you have a fancy PTZ optics camera, you can now robotically control it from directly inside of the UI using the new PTZ controller window. This is a Pro feature, so you need to have Wirecast Pro to make it work, Pro 9, but it is fantastic. And we've got some great tutorials coming your way in a couple days, probably out either by tomorrow or next week, showing you step by step how to do that. We'll be talking on, actually I'll be on the PTZ Optics show next week live with Paul Richards and Tessa, and we'll be talking, Tessa Protesto, we'll be talking about this integration feature. We already did a little segment on this over at NAB. You can check that over there. I think we even streamed it live to the Wirecast page, so you might have already seen that interview. We'll be talking more about that, but it is fantastic. These cameras turn your single camera into a multi-camera production. It's awesome. You can set up hundreds of camera angles if that's your jam. So this is a great new feature. I'm excited about this. Been wanting to add it for a while, and I think you'll see a lot more cameras and other types of protocols coming soon. But these are the ones we've tested and the ones we recommend. So on that note, we also have, and I've been talking about this one for a while, the X-Keys support. The X-Keys support is fantastic, and it is the first custom design controller for Wirecast that is USB, and it goes into, we were waiting for a Mac or Windows version of the drivers to become available so that either Wirecast users on Mac could use this or Wirecast users on Windows could use this, and now we've got it. So the X-Keys controller is amazing. This is an add-on, so it's something that you need to go out and buy extra, but if you do, they're pretty amazing. Having already started to play with this, I did a ton of demos on these controllers out at NAB, and I love them. They're so cool. They're just, I don't know, this controller is great. It makes using Wirecast so easy. And actually in the studio here, we've moved entirely over to this controller for most of the shot switching and control stuff. And then still use a keyboard for some things, obviously entering text and changing things, still use a mouse for certain things. But when you're just doing the switching in production, Deborah Lee can punch a button and actually pull up the next feature right on this screen here. So I'm actually going to ask her to move to the next feature. So hit that X-Keys controller button, which she just did. See? So easy. So the next thing that's coming that you probably want to know about is the new Add Source menu. The new Add Source menu, this is a new window. If you get Wirecast 9, you'll be noticing a lot. It lets you search for sources, lets you favorite them with stars, so you can go to your favorites and always select the ones that you use all the time. They should just automatically populate. There's a great, you can add media, and everything's sort of categorized really easily. So you can see right there in the window there, but you know, you've got your video sources, your audio capture sources, your network sources, your overlays, and so forth. So it really makes it easy to categorize them all. And then of course, if you just want to look for everything, go to all, and then you've got the down below the Add Media button. So this is the start of a new way to manage your sources in Wirecast, and It's here now. Now, the big question. A lot of you may not have realized this, but with Wirecast 8, we now include support when you buy Wirecast. So with Wirecast 8 and later, and now 9, when you buy that upgrade, if you're on any versions earlier than 8, so 7, 6, 5, and 4, I think 3, 2, 1, you're out of luck. So if you're holding on to one of those ancient versions, then you're going to need to buy a full version. But with Wirecast sort of 4 through 7, if you're on that version, you need to buy into the latest version. But after you do, you'll get support included with your purchase. What does that mean? It means you get a year of free upgrades and support. So 9 is free for you. You already paid for it in a sense when you bought 8. And the same thing is true moving forward. So if you are still on 7 or 6 and you're waiting to upgrade, now's your chance. You should do this because actually it kind of relates to some of the news we're going to be talking about soon. But in addition, you just get all these features. They just get rolled in. You can upgrade whenever you want, and it doesn't cost you anything because you've already paid for that support subscription. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. That's the new model that we're on, and I could talk more about that maybe in future episodes. We can cover it. If you have questions about that, a good place to go is the Wirecast users group or to our support page. We actually have a handy handout on this type of stuff, so we can answer questions there. And I'll be doing some live Q&A sessions in the Facebook users group. So just look for the Wirecast users on Facebook, and you can join there and ask questions. And we're floating around, and we'll be doing live Q&As in that group as well. So it's a great place to get support, get help if you're curious about this. Okay. So with that, I have one other news item, and then I want to bring on our guest for the week, Mr. Robbie Ferguson, and we'll be talking about live streaming on a budget and producing live video on a budget. And very few people know that Ben Robbie. He started, well, I'll let him explain it. We'll get to him in just a second. I'll bring him on. The last news of the week, Facebook. So I want to talk about this real quick. Facebook is in the news. You've probably noticed it. Again, if you've not been hiding under a rock, you've probably noticed that Mark Zuckerberg had to testify in front of Congress. There's been scandals with the Russia stuff. There's been scandals with how some of the companies were accessing the data on Facebook and using it in the election. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on about the Facebook platform and its APIs and how it gathers data and how it shares that data. And one of the things it does is it has the live API. So applications, third-party applications like us, Wirecast, can access the live API and help you stream to Facebook easier. But because of all this controversy, Facebook has announced they will be changing their APIs and tightening them up, making them more secure, doing a lot of changes. So if you've noticed recently, if you've been heading to Facebook with Wirecast or anything else, you may have noticed that maybe there's been a lot of confusion over the last few months. Sometimes the streams didn't work. There's just a lot of changes that Facebook is rolling out. So that's a long way of saying that if you want to always stay on top of the latest changes with the Facebook API, they will be breaking some things. So older Wirecast users may not be able to log into their Facebook account and stream live inside Wirecast. You will need to upgrade to the later version or the latest version to stay on top of it. So our team is working very closely with the Facebook team and making sure we are staying on top of these changes and implementing them. Wirecast 9 and moving forward will always have the latest changes as soon as we can get them. And usually we can try to get them ahead of time before Facebook changes them. So we try to stay quite current, and so you guys don't break your streams to Facebook in Wirecast using the API, which gives you all the benefits like geotagging and sponsored streams, and you can do a ton of sort of customization and scheduling options right within Wirecast. So that feature, if you like using that feature a lot, then you'll need to it's a really good reason to upgrade moving forward. So keep in mind, I've heard that they will be breaking that coming, we're not exactly sure, but in the next probably not too distant future. So if that's the case, then older versions of Wirecast, and we're talking even versions of 8 and below, 7, 6, I think we implemented Facebook live streaming in 6.0.8 if my memory serves. So that means that those versions, those Facebook logins won't work anymore because Facebook's going to be turning off that old API and introducing their new API, which will only be in the latest versions of Wirecast. Okay, so you heard it here first. We'll be talking a lot more about that coming forward, but that's some news items for you just to keep aware of. And I wanted to make just let you guys know. So let me just pull up the comments here and see who's joining us. Mr. Robert Hicks, welcome. Deb, welcome. Lutz, good to see you as always. Just installed Wirecast 9. Congrats. Robert Hicks 77. So Robert, you're going to need to update that if you're going to want to keep using the Facebook stuff. What else we got? George, any integration with Skype yet? Not beyond NDI. Good question. And so Skype announced NDI support, so you can bring in Skype through NDI and other things. So yes, I think I answered most of your questions. Good to see you guys. Thanks for joining. Let's, without further ado, bring on our special guest of the week, Mr. Robbie Ferguson from Category5 TV. Robbie, are you there?
I am here. Hey, Andrew.
Welcome, welcome. I'm glad to see you. I was a little in doubt if we could get all the internets to work correctly and get this going.
And George's question really hits home. Does Skype work?
Does Skype work? Yes.
Yeah.
We were trying to pull you in on Skype. We were trying to pull you in on Zoom. We've ultimately ended up on Zoom. Any way we could get you in here. So you're a bit remote up there. Tell us a little bit about your setup up there, because obviously this is a good lead into the learning to do this on a budget and from any location.
Well, first of all, I mean, the whole theme of a budget broadcast from Category 5's perspective is when I started broadcasting Category 5 Technology TV, which is our flagship show, it was never really intended to become I guess as big as it is, right? So, plain and simple. I mean, we started it out 11 years ago almost now. It's going to be 11 years in October. And started it specifically to offer a free technology help kind of program that people could watch through their internet connection and just have a regular, it was every Tuesday night they could tune in and ask their viewer questions and things like that, just about tech, and get free answers. And, I've always hoped to be able to provide good answers to those questions. And so it's grown over the time. So the whole theme of doing it on a budget, it was never intended that Category 5 would grow to the size that it is. And so it's really been a lot of stepping stones, Andrew, to be honest with you. So when I started it, it was like I think a 240p webcam is how we started it up. And I had a big honkin' Rode NT1 microphone sitting just a little off the camera so that you could hear me and things like that. So, but it's been a process. So I'm up here in Canada. We're just north of Toronto, about an hour north of Toronto. So the snow has pretty much melted. We're starting to, I'm wearing a t-shirt tonight, so
I like the t-shirt, by the way. Good choice.
Well, thank you. So from here in our studio, so we're at the point now after 11 years of broadcasting where we're in an actual studio space that we rent. It's about 900 plus square feet, and we're here once a week, every single week. And after 544 weeks, we have never missed a week, if you can believe that.
Wow. So you don't know what a vacation is? You've never heard that term before up in Canada?
You know what? That's been something to adapt to too, and maybe viewers who are broadcasting as well. Maybe that's the position that you're in. It started because I need to learn to give myself time off too, right? And through the commitment that we have, and we'll discuss a little bit about commitment and kind of the being basically so committed to broadcasting that your viewers know that you're going to be on the air at a certain time every single week. That's really important as we're building our following. So a part of that, and keeping with the vacation thought, is that I started, well, once in a while I'll record a show, or once in a while I actually, for the first little while, Andrew, to be honest with you, I packed up my rig. So when we built our Wirecast rig, we built it specifically with a hand handle. It's portable. It can be carried out the door, but it's enormous. So I didn't enjoy doing that too much. But we would rent out a facility, and on my vacation, I would still show up at the facility, make sure they have good internet connection, and I would broadcast live from wherever I was vacationing. So my wife is very pleased that about 2 or 3 years ago now, we decided to start pre-recording our vacation shows. So basically, I just have to remote in. I use an LTE connection from my, like a hotspot from my smartphone, and I actually connect into my Wirecast computer in the studio and press play. It's as simple as that.
That's perfect.
And that's my vacation.
Yeah, so if you plan ahead, you can actually escape for a week or two and get on vacation when you need to.
It can be done.
It can be done, even in the life of a weekly broadcaster.
Yeah.
So, so Robbie, I think it's amazing that you've grown Category 5 as much as you have in the last 11 years or so, as you say, because I really love your shows, and I've been watching them over the past probably 5 years-ish or so. And so when I found out you guys were using Wirecast, I was super excited, and I loved watching some of the demos you guys did. So you obviously were a natural choice for us to bring on to this show to talk a little bit about how you use Wirecast in your show and kind of what that journey's been like for you. So, I mean, with the idea that we are talking about live streaming on a budget and learning how to do that, you mentioned, you know, X number of years ago, you started with just a 240 webcam. Obviously, webcams have come a long way, but do you still think that's probably the best place to start if we just begin with what do you need just to get up and running to get a show that looks pretty good and doesn't cost you an arm and a leg?
Yeah, these days you can pick up like a Microsoft LifeCam Cinema or something like that.
I think we may have lost Robbie again. Apologize for that. Robbie will probably be back on as soon as we grab him. And so it looks like his just audio and video feed froze. But that being said, and if you want a little background on this, we're not quite sure where the issue is. We did some testing with our normal Skype talk show box. We did some testing with Zoom, and we found that Robbie was able to use the virtual camera much easier with Zoom. And then he's got an LTE connection out of his studio up there. So obviously the LTE connection works great for everything he's been using it for Category 5 ever since they started using that location. But for whatever reason, the audio and video on Zoom has been troublesome, to say the least. And we're not sure if the internet connection is bad on our end or if it's bad on his end. All my monitors here tell us that our bandwidth is pretty darn good. But some of you, when I was doing some testing before the show, I even noticed that YouTube was having some weird trouble. So I don't know. It's the ghosts of the internet. It could be Northern California Comcast. It could be Toronto, switches and connections up there. It's just, you never know exactly where the problem is. What's interesting about this, though, is coming up in June, we've actually... oh, sounds like Robbie's just back. Robbie was just finishing a last thought here about internet here, but one of the things that we recently acquired was a company called AneoQuest, and their whole job is to figure out where the problem is. So I need to start asking them to get in on our live streams, and maybe we can get a little more visibility on where in the chain something might be breaking down. Robbie, good to have you back.
I apologize. Now we were talking about can we start with a webcam?
Right. And internet is probably another whole subtopic we'll need to save for a moment.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll touch on that. I was just saying, like, when you're seeing me tonight, you're seeing me, I am looking at you through a 4K camera, but we're doing this through a wireless connection, and we're doing it through some web browser-based software. So what you're seeing is not the quality of our weekly broadcast.
Right. I was explaining that. I was saying that we tried Skype, we tried Zoom, and for whatever reason, something's going on. And we don't know if it's NorCal or if it's in Toronto or if it's Zoom servers. We're not sure.
Let's talk a little bit about, as a host of a show, we have to be cool with this. And I'm sure, Andrew, with your experience, that you were cool just there when I lost my connection. That's a big part of broadcasting as well. When we're doing live webcasts like this, we're going to hit issues. We're going to have technical difficulties, and you just go with the flow. And viewers learn to. I think we're at that era right now where viewers understand that and actually appreciate if we're real about those kinds of difficulties. So back to the question about a webcam. Can we start a show with a webcam? I started with what was available at the time. It was like 320 by 240. It was terrible. Go back to season 1, episode 1 of Category 5 Technology TV, and you'll see how far we've come. Now, I'm looking at you through a 4K camera, but
that is a big jump,
now.
By the way.
It's a huge jump. It's stepping stones, as I say. So yes, you can start with a webcam, because these days you get a 1080p Microsoft LifeCam Cinema or Studio camera, and they produce a pretty good video. You can hack them so that it doesn't phase in and out on the focus and things like that. And that's another thing. You got to learn to get your hands a little bit dirty and do a little bit of hacking.
Do you have a preference between the LifeCams or the Logitechs? I haven't done any image testing or any comparison.
Yeah. Well, I had better success with the. You know what? The C920s are pretty good though, but again, they have a real phasing issue. So if you are not tight to the shot with a C920, this is the Logitech 1080p camera, and we refer to the C920. There are newer cameras.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the C920, but I've got one of them here.
That looks like a
930. Might be a 930. Yeah.
But they can do some phasing, but also. With any webcam, here's the thing, is you're going to be using your USB bandwidth, and you're going to run into snags if you want to set up multiple webcams on your rig. You're going to run out of power on the USB bus, and that can be a problem. So you may have to supplement that with like a powered USB hub or something like that gives you like 2.1 amps to the camera and then goes into the computer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I noticed that you will run out of power on your bus, your USB bus. So if you have if you plug in all these devices that don't have an AC power adapter, they don't draw power from your wall outlet, they draw power from the computer. I notice you'll run out of voltage or amperage or whatever on the USB bus far before you'll run out of data problems.
Mm-hmm. And that people don't always realize, maybe we don't always realize that that's the case. You have a printer, a scanner, and 3 webcams plugged into your USB ports. Well, it's only 5 volts, folks, and it's only a couple of amps, so you really do have to supplement that. So back to the question, do I prefer the Microsoft cameras? I had better success hacking the Microsoft LifeCam Studio camera than I did with the C920. Although the C920, if you disassemble it, you can hard set the focus on those cameras. But both are going to give you a really good picture. Yes, it can be done.
Quick question about the hacking. Why do you recommend, or why do you feel that's even necessary?
Well, with these webcams, you got to understand that they're built for something like Skype, right? They're built to use for calling mom and dad and making a remote call that way. And because of that, they're built to be on your monitor, right, very close proximity, and so the depth of field of the focus of those cameras is very, very small. So if you set it back on a tripod like I have now, which is another reason that I really did like the Microsoft cameras, because they're tripod mountable. The newer Logitechs are as well. But if you set it back, you're going to be constantly out of focus, and it's going to phase in and out because it can't get a focus on the subject. So when I say hacking it, it's hardware hacking. It's very simple. You can find YouTube videos. You basically disassemble it, and you can hard set the focus on those cameras so that it doesn't do that, because we had that in the early days. But then, speaking of hacking, now going one step further and saying, okay, well, I'm ready to step things up, and how Category 5 did this kind of the stepping stones. We started with that really lousy camera to get things going, and then when things took off, season 1, all of a sudden we had 10,000 views a week, and it was unbelievable. So then we installed something like the C920 at that point. But then I got into using DSLRs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. DSLRs are a whole other can of worms. You're going to pay about $400 for a cheap one, like we use the D5100 from Nikon, but they don't have clean HDMI output. So you plug it in and you've got the screen up with the battery indicator and everything else, and so you think, oh, well, this is not going to work. So you hack the firmware, and something like Nikon Hacker in our case allowed us to create clean HDMI output on those cameras. And so for a few years we used D5100s, which are DSLR cameras, so they give a very good picture, and they output basically 1080p from the camera. And as you know, the Nikon camcorders, the Nikon DSLRs do really good video as well.
Yeah, and you've got suddenly a selection of lenses you can use with different focal lengths and depths of field, right?
And because they were so cheap, you can we started with one and then we added a second one. So you get a couple cameras that are both they both have the same color profile and everything else, so they looked really good together.
Is it possible to hack the firmware for those cameras from a Mac, or is it a Windows only hack program?
Well, Nikon Hacker, for example, is a web-based system, but it does require Silverlight, so I don't know if that can be done on a Mac. You could install VirtualBox and throw a Windows machine in there if you needed to, but who doesn't have access to a Windows machine just for the simple need to hack a firmware, right?
Yeah.
And then you just output the firmware. You simply save it to an SD card, and then you import it into your camera as a firmware update, and boom, you've got clean HDMI output for $400 with
awesome.
1080p DSLR. So it looked really good. But DSLRs, again, if you ever accidentally leave autofocus on, you're done. You need to pull your focus before the show, and you can't be moving in and out of the field of the depth of field during the broadcast unless you have someone pulling focus. So that's why we then, over 10 years later, we decided to upgrade and installed some 4K camcorders.
So what are you using now?
What you're seeing me on right now is an AX100 from Sony. We also use the AX53 on our show called New Every Day because it's a good run and gun, and it's also 4K. And our main camera, our A camera, is a JVC camcorder, which is a full-bodied. It's like a full 4K prosumer camera, and it pulls real nice. It's got more manual
the FDR, we cut to my desktop, the FDR AX100. Let's see that.
The 100 is what you're seeing me on right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely, I don't know if you can jump to my desktop here, but I think on B&H looks like it's going for about $1,500.
Yeah,
that's a pretty good camera.
And B&H is a great place to shop.
Let's see. You also mentioned the Nikon D51. Is it 5100?
The D5100, yeah. And if you're on B&H anyways, Andrew, so I'm going to show you a little secret.
Okay.
And this is where I got my first. So if you jump back to B&H, click on for their used products.
So where is
so up on the main menu, you're going to see a feature for used on the right-hand side beside specials.
Right there.
And just type in D5100 because remember, this is an older camera, right? And the 5100, the reason that I chose that is because it's very easy to hack.
So Deborah Lee, jumping back here. So all I did here, guys, was as per Robbie's suggestion, I clicked on used. I then jumped up, and you can actually see the category here in the search box here. And then I just typed in D5100, and they're going for $300. There's one right
now.
There.
Look at the price, yeah. So now that's the body, and it comes with the 18 to 55 millimeter lens as well. So that's a kit that will get you started with really good 1080p video, which is going to be unclean HDMI output at first, but you just use Nikon Hacker to
Nikon Hacker portal.
There you go.
Boom.
So that again is a Silverlight web-based application that's going to allow you to hack that camera. So for $300, you got a 1080p camera. So we're doing it on the cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, I may be looking at you on a $1,500 camera right now, but that's after 10 years. So my whole premise and the way that we've done Category 5 and the way I would encourage you to consider if you're looking to do this on the cheap is to never feel like you have to go to that $1,500 camera right away. You can find these stepping stones, find little ways to get around the cost of building a studio and a broadcast environment, and you can be doing this on the cheap, absolutely, and be pulling in a pretty great show and building up your viewer base before you really have to invest a lot of money in it.
Yeah, so let's talk. I think that's a really good piece of advice. Take a step at a time, and then spend a little time searching the used forums, find a slightly nicer camera. The Nikon's great, right? And then there are some other DSLRs like the Rebels and some other ones that come in that $400 to $700 range, right?
Yeah, but once you get into the Rebels, then you've got to find out whether or not you're going to be able to hack the firmware. Always, when you're buying a camera, the reason again that I'm saying that we chose the 5100, it's easy to hack. So you need to find out with the Rebel. You need to check Magic Lantern. You need to make sure that it's available for that camera, depending on which model you're looking at, because you don't want to get stuck with a camera that you can't get clean HDMI output, because remember, these are DSLRs, and based on regulations they are not allowed to sell them as camcorders. So they have limitations like a 20-minute cap on recording. They have automatic shutoff if you're not recording to SD card, and they make it so that you can't have HDMI output and recording to SD card at the same time. So unless you can hack that camera, you're not going to be able to use it as a video camera.
So that's actually a legal or a trade limitation that's causing this problem. It's not... Okay, because I was thinking, I remember back when DSLRs were first coming out, and I was using like a Canon D5, some of the other ones, and we were running all those issues, automatic shutoff, dirty HDMI, all that stuff, and then hacks started coming out, and then I think even some firmware updates for the cameras themselves came out that solved some of those problems. But you're saying that even now, all these years later, there was actually a ceiling to what the Canon or Sony or Panasonic could actually release to make these viable in-studio cameras.
And you'll hear rumors of people saying, oh, no, it's because if they record for longer than 20 minutes, the sensor will overheat, for example. That's very popular. That's a popular one that the manufacturers use. And it's not the case. It's not the case at all.
Oh, really?
I have left my D5100 accidentally on after a show and came back to it a week later, and it was not even warm. There were no problems. So it's not that at all. European regulations say that if it's over 19 minutes and 59 seconds of record time, it's classified as a camcorder. And if that's the case, then they tax the manufacturer on that camera. So now the cost of the camera goes up. They lost the price point, and they can't sell it for the same price point. So they
time to start a consumers interest group and start some petitions here.
It's a lot of information out there, but it's all mixed, right? So it helps to talk to people like Andrew or myself who have been there, done that, and gone through the whole process.
Yeah, so I think that is fantastic advice, because that actually clears up a question I've had for a while, which is that it's been so many years. I'd remembered that there was something about the trading and camcorders and the classification and tax brackets of the different devices. But again, having not paid that much attention to it over the last few years, and with these really actually quite affordable alternatives coming from like companies like Blackmagic, and I mean, now that they've sort of entered the market, in my opinion, they're really forcing a lot of the other manufacturers to come up with comparable designs and models. So you know, we've just, now that since Blackmagic was a company we were already involved with through Wirecast, it made a natural extension for us to reach out to them about their cameras for our in-studio purposes. But that actually brings up a good next step of the chain. So we start with the camera. Next, it's time to move on to capture cards, and Blackmagic, of course, makes capture cards. You know, it's great, all well and good to have a clean HDMI feed or a clean SDI feed, but if you can't take it anymore, get it into your computer, you're kind of up a creek a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about capture cards. And I don't know if you've even had a chance to play around with something like a wireless, an advanced wireless capture sort of RF adapter. Like
dude, I'm on a budget.
But you have one of the most popular tech shows. I'm sure you get to play around with some cool toys like the new Tech Spark, maybe.
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely, and that's certainly you know, a benefit to have a popular show, because we work with some really great companies. Before we move on to capture cards, I just want to say on the camera piece, one of the things when we're shopping for cameras is look at two things: resale value or repurpose value. So with our DSLRs, for example, I could flip those things for $400 easily. Okay, so if I wanted to put them on the local classifieds, I could sell one of those cameras for $400 used, and it would sell. I could, in my case, I've simply repurposed them. So they have a built-in intervalometer, and what that means is that I can set it to take a picture every 10 seconds. So we set those up in our studio with different positions now, and they simply take still shots for us at however many megapixels they are. So we end up with some really nice still shots of the live broadcast that didn't come off of the 1080p source. So they're like full resolution pictures. So think about the resale value of the camera and the repurpose value of the camera, whether you want to continue using it. And that's another way that you can decide whether it's a good stepping stone for you. So moving on to the capture cards. When we hack our firmware on the camera, it's something that we don't always realize is that sometimes the camera is not going to put out a perfect resolution. And what I mean by that is a camcorder, like the camcorder that I'm using right now is, well, let's see. It's like 3840 by, it's a very specific resolution. So this camera is, I just installed Wirecast 9. I'm learning my way around.
All right, all right.
Yeah. I can show you my screen. We're going to get some...
There you go.
Here you are. So this is my camera shot here. There we are. That's why. Okay, so I've selected my camera. Can you guys see that okay on the left-hand side?
Yep.
Ignore the feedback here in the video. So my camera is... Oh, now this one... Right now, my mistake. This camera I'm pulling in at 1080p. Okay. So if I was pulling it in at 4K, and remember, that's the reason for that is because, as I mentioned, our A camera is over there. It's the JVC.
Right.
So we have, speaking of capture cards, we have multiple different capture cards. This one is being pulled into a Magewell 1080p card, and that card is brilliant because it has 4 1080p inputs, so similar to like a deck link from Blackmagic. But what I found in comparing different capture cards is that some cards, like the Blackmagic Intensity, was a great card for me starting up,
right? But
it didn't play nicely with odd resolutions. So where right now I'm pulling in exactly 1920 by 1080 because it's coming off of a camcorder, when I was pulling off of a DSLR, I might have been pulling 1932 by 1076, something like that, and I'd have to pull in and crop a little bit to make it work. So I would just get a black screen on a Blackmagic card. Now I understand that they've improved the drivers and made some changes, but the Magewells have always worked really, really well for me. So it's important that you kind of make sure that it's something that's going to work with the resolution you're working with.
Yeah, agreed, and frame rates as well. So and
sure.
then different card manufacturers have different, and even camera manufacturers have different ways of classifying frame rates. So whether progressive segmented frame, PSF, and other, you'll see all these sort of acronyms thrown around in 1080p versus 1080i, and they don't always translate to between manufacturers. So what your Sony or your Panasonic or your camera might be telling you, it's no, I'm doing this. The card might call something else. It might call a different PSF or rather than a full progressive frame and stuff like that. But I do agree with you on the auto detects on the Magewells. I really have been very pleasantly surprised with when I plug in a sort of an odd camera or frame rate, it tends to just find it, and I rarely have issues with it throwing throwing it off, and that's not always the case with some of the other manufacturers. So it's definitely, I can speak to that.
So I think if you wanted to save some money and you're using a camcorder, the fact is a camcorder, like the one I'm on right now, is outputting a perfect resolution. So the Blackmagic cards have worked perfectly with those resolutions. When I was using the DSLR with a bit of an odd resolution, I had to use the Magewell. So if you're using a camcorder, you could probably cheap out a little bit on the capture device by going with like a Blackmagic Intensity or deck link or something in that line. But if you're using something that is going to be odd resolutions, or if you're constantly swapping like I am, I didn't even realize I was running in 1080p right now. So if you're constantly pulling cables and moving things around, I love the Magewell for that because it works with everything. It absolutely has worked with everything. So I have that 4-input 1080p card, and then I also have the 4K input card as well.
Yeah.
Also from Magewell.
Another thing to note, your 4-input card, so they're great because they do two things, right? They take all that camera sort of bandwidth off of your USB bus, which you don't want to put all that on the USB bus. That's
off
a bad
the CPU
idea.
as well.
And off the CPU. And they take a lot, and so the first thing is they're already doing a lot of processing, and they're going direct into the motherboard through the express lanes, the PCI express lanes. So it's a great sort of direct connection from your camera to your computer's sort of hardware. The other thing that you want to look for, though, is when you have one of those cards with, like you do, a 4-channel, and that, like, as many as 4 cameras can be connected to that card, that different manufacturers don't always do resolution or frame rate independent channels. So if you want to plug in 2 or 3 different cameras that have, again, a Panasonic, a JVC, a 4K, you know, whatever it is on different slots or channels on your card, some card manufacturers are like, I can only take one kind of camera, one kind of signal on each channel, whereas the Magewells seem to be very good at rolling with it and having, again, a very independent channel.
I can attest to that because connected to mine right now, so I've got my main camera. I've also got a Wirecast device. I've got my laptop computer plugged into HDMI, which is a bit of an odd resolution because it's not an HD laptop, and I can switch between them, and it's got the resolution perfectly. So I can actually bring up my phone, and I can't tonight live because I'm on a different Wi-Fi network, but with my Wirecast, I can actually bring my phone up wirelessly to Telestream Wirecast because it's a camera shot coming off of the Magewell.
You're going to have to stop right there and tell me a little bit more about this Wirecast
Oh,
device.
sure.
Okay, so I always want to bring in device screens into my, into my broadcast or for demos on my screen, etc. So you're telling me you've actually, and I actually started trying to rig this with a Chromecast. I tried plugging a Chromecast into a little monitor.
And I'll stop
or
you
capture
right
card.
there.
Yeah.
Not the right device.
So let's start. Let's say, so you're telling me you have an HDMI device hooked into one of your channels of your Magewell card, an HDMI quad card. It's plugged into one of the HDMI slot 2 or 3 on that card, and you can just stream to it from your phone.
Yeah, it's called a Wirecast capture device. It's from Anycast, and it's waiting for a connection. So, but it's on a different. Unfortunately, it's on a different Wi-Fi network. It works really, really well. Your Android device already has Wirecast set up and installed, so you just have to activate it, and boom, it's up on your screen for you. So whatever resolution you're streaming. So why I wanted to stop you on the Chromecast is because Chromecast is for Chrome software, so you can stream video and things like that. Once the video starts, it starts on the screen. With Wirecast, on the other hand, and this Anycast device, everything that's on your screen, doesn't matter what it is on your screen. So you're able to pull it into Telestream Wirecast, and it's just like it's like a $14 device.
What kind of bandwidth or quality signal are you getting? Do they actually announce like we can get a 10 megabit per second, 1080p, 30 frames per second? Like, do they tell you
on there? We've done demos on the show where we've done gaming for this device, and actually if you go to our website, Category5.tv, click on search and just type in Anycast, you'll see a video where we reviewed the device, and it's got some demos. I wish that I could bring it up on the screen for you, Andrew, and it's just it's one of those things of live broadcasting, but check out that video and you'll be able to see how that all came together.
Wow.
But it works really well. Like, we were doing 3D gaming, I'm holding it in my hand and streaming to the Telestream Wirecast unit and broadcasting it live and recording to disk.
Fantastic.
Wirelessly.
That's fantastic. So obviously my next question is iOS devices. Do they have to be unlocked, or is there a way to does
for
Anycast
Wirecast on iOS?
Yeah, does Anycast have
well, Anycast is the brand of the of the device that
but I assume they have like an app you have to download
receiver
to configure the device.
Oh yeah, like if you do Anycast for iOS, boom, Anycast, it's already there. Yeah, I don't use Apple devices.
Okay. But you've not tested, so you haven't tested, but it should work.
418,000 results for Anycast, or let's do Wirecast. Pardon me, Wirecast, Miracast for iOS.
Yep.
Boom. If you want to mirror the display from a newer Android phone or tablet,
that's not what we're looking for.
Oh wait.
So Apple does not natively support Wirecast, which I figured. And then also Apple's very very.
This is why I don't use it.
I know. I know. So I've talked to a lot of Apple developers, and one of the things they say is that iOS developers, they, not necessarily people who work for Apple, that they were saying that Apple's very protective of screen mirroring from devices because they obviously, for privacy and all the rest of it. So it's very hard to show everything that's going on your iPad or iOS screen unless you're using the Apple AirPlay or something like that. Now, I'll have to try. I know there is a company called Air Squirrels that does like that did a mirroring app for this, but I don't know if they've kind of condense it into a little HDMI, receiver.
What I have done, Andrew, in the past, and I'm not by any stretch an Apple user. I don't really particularly like their devices because of the lockdown, like the way that they lock them down. But I have had people in the studio who had to cast their devices, and they were iPads and iPhones and things. We picked up from Amazon. We got an HDMI output adapter for the device. Plain and simple. So it's just an HDMI cable that comes out of it. Now, wirelessly, Miracast from Android is fantastic. I'm not sure how you do that on Apple, though. It's not something I cover.
That's all right. I thought I'd ask just in case. So let's talk a little bit more. We've got maybe another 10 minutes or so.
10 minutes.
I want to keep rolling with this. I could talk for hours on this. So we've talked a little bit about capture cards. We talked about cameras. Let's talk about computers, and let's talk about streaming and software.
And how are our viewers doing? If you have questions, I'm doing my best, and I know Andrew and the team at Telestream are looking at the chat as well. If you have any questions for us, this would be a great time to get those in.
Hey, I'm back up. So I actually had lost all the questions, so that's why I didn't ask for questions, because I wasn't going to be able to read them. But now I can get it. So
yeah, and I've got them up on my screen as well. So so I definitely would welcome those. And I'd love to also. I know we have a very short time together tonight, but thinking about the audio and video chain, and you mentioned about the computer hardware and things like that. There's so much involved in setting up a broadcast studio, and when you're doing it on a budget, it's really just making sure that you've got the power that you need. You really kind of have to work backwards. So when you're putting together your rig, we need to make sure that we've got enough power that we are kind of future ready. When I started this thing, I started with a little webcam, and
we may have lost you. Yep. We dropped him. So I'm sure he will be back on as soon as his network connection allows. But just real quick, now that I do have the ability to read some of your comments, I want to go through a couple of those. So first of all, Robert, you said you love that Magewell quad card. They are pretty fantastic. Again, that resolution independence really matters. Ricardo, I'll have to translate that comment or that question. Can't quite understand that. Saud Khan is wondering, why does Facebook lag when compared to YouTube? The audio is very slightly out of sync, but fine on YouTube. That's a good question. We've had other people saying that Facebook streams sometimes lag. The audio and video is sometimes out of sync. Don't have a solid answer for you, just that we know that it occurs, and it does not seem to be related to Wirecast. It seems to be something to do with the way the audio and video get played back on Facebook from their servers. That's just a best guess. I will, if I have any more information on that, if we find out more about that, I'll first happy to share it here. Is Robbie using Wirecast in 4K? Robbie, I don't want to totally speak for him, but he does have 4K and he can bring in 4K into his capture cards and then bring them into Wirecast. Wirecast does not have preset 4K dimensions yet, because it's not something we want to fully endorse until we've had chance to bring back. But Robbie's actually on the line again. So Robbie, one of the questions in the chat is about using your 4K camera with Wirecast. And I was just mentioning that Wirecast doesn't have a default canvas size for 4K, but that doesn't mean it doesn't support it. You just enter your custom canvas size and it's totally fine with it. What's been your experience with using your 4K cameras in Wirecast?
Well, I would love to show you, but you don't take commercial breaks, so I can't set these things up. You really need commercial breaks.
We do. We need to start monetizing.
That is when we in the tech broadcast, live broadcasting time, set yourself up with commercial breaks. We need to talk about day parting, because that's your chance to readjust everything and change things and check on audio and things.
That's a good point.
Make sure your internet works, that kind of stuff. Okay, so Wirecast 7 did not work with our 4K cameras.
Interesting.
So, so then we upgraded to Wirecast 8, and I actually was a little late to the Wirecast 8 game, so went straight to 8.2, and I found, so we used the Magewell 4K PCI Express card to bring in our 4K camera. I can see it on the screen when I bring up like a preview window in my regular recorder, like my video editor and things like that, so I knew it was working. So here's the thing. If you start Wirecast first and you turn on your camera after Wirecast has been has been opened, Wirecast will not see it as a 4K camera, because Wirecast, when it loads, when you first open Wirecast, it detects everything and it sets the resolutions of your sources based on what's currently connected. Now, if that camera's turned off, it's going to see the source, that 4K input, as something like 720p or 1080p, like the default setting of the card. So then when I turn on my camera, I can only pull 1080p. What is going on? So make sure you shut down Wirecast completely, turn on all your sources, and you should always do this anyways. Turn on your cameras, make sure everything's up and running first, then open Wirecast, and you'll find that Wirecast gives you the full resolution of that camera. That is assuming that you have a capture card that can handle it. Now, if I plug the 4K camera, as I have tonight, into the 1080p card, it's only giving me 1920 by 1080, which is what I would expect. But if I then unplugged that, if we had a commercial break, and plugged it into the 4K capture card and restarted Wirecast, I'd be able to pull it in at a full 4K. That's as of version 8 of Telestream Wirecast. Now, with version 9 coming out, which just came out about about 20 hours ago? Yeah. So I've got that installed, and we're seeing 4K sources there, same exact way as version 8. So no problems whatsoever.
Great question. So you're saying, first of all, order of operations, extremely important in any technical environment. But yes, certainly with Wirecast is no exception. And then you're saying that the camera actually, or Wirecast, will detect those sources at their native 4K resolutions from the card. And then when you click on them, the canvas size, it auto loads probably at 1920 or 720. It's not going to jump to a 4K canvas size. Do you set those independently, or do you just like to use the 4K sources as at their normal size, so you can use it in a 1080 canvas and just move the camera around and pan scan?
Well, it defaults to the highest resolution. Wirecast will default to the highest resolution, and I leave it there. But one of the advantages to, if I'm kind of following the question right, I'm going to bring up Wirecast. Now, keeping in mind that I'm on a 1080p source right now. I'm going to bring it up, though, for you so that you can see, and I'm going to turn off Auto Live. Oh, you know what? I can probably... I'm not sure how... If
you're doing that, you can set that up. I'm going to answer a question in the comment here real fast.
Oh, sure.
So JG Pasterjack asked if there's a separate audio capture card or device that works well with Wirecast. We love to separate our audio from our camera so we can run multiple mics. This is a fantastic question, JG, and I have an answer for you. So I recommend using any device that is compatible with, say, for example, Wasapi audio protocols on PC. And now most of those can come in, and Wirecast now will detect all of those individual channels and allow you to configure them. The audio devices we've most tested with here are made by Tascam. The Tascam USB audio capture devices. Those are pretty fantastic, and actually I have one under the desk. We have one in this control room, and we like them a lot. So once you install those Tascam drivers, those are a good one to go with, but they're not the only game in town. There's other audio devices that people like to use, like the Scarlett Focusrites and the rest of them. I just don't have as much personal experience with them, but just about any of those will be great. What you're looking for, though, is one that's going to come in and you can detect each of the individual channels for different mics, and then you can manipulate those individually in Wirecast. Okay, back to you, Robbie.
I thought we were talking about on the cheap tonight.
So that's true.
I have a stereo output coming off of a board, and it goes into the 3.5 millimeter. Or 2.5.
You know, and I always have a bag full of the little C Media USB adapters for audio as well.
I don't do USB anymore because I just got so fed up with USB. It's high CPU usage. Anything that you plug into your USB is going to skyrocket your CPU usage. So I got away from that. I'm fully HDMI now, but audio comes out from the audio chain is very important, folks, because remember, people are listening more than they're watching. All of my microphones go through the board, which is just a cheap Behringer board, and then it goes out to an Ultramizer Pro, which is like a compressor, so that if I get really loud or if somebody else's mic is too quiet or too loud, it'll adjust that on the fly. And then it goes out to a BBE Sonic Maximizer, which just gives it a really nice full sound. And then it comes straight out of that and into the computer through the built-in motherboard's audio. That's how I do it. It's on the cheap.
So I'm going to tell you on the cheap. Now, this is where I will differ from you a little bit. I think USB for audio alone actually works pretty fantastically well. And in my experience, particularly, again, if you are using a USB device that isn't pulling a lot of that voltage or wattage, and it's independently powered. So you want to look for perhaps an independently powered audio interface, and you can get a much cleaner signal. I've done a number of tests, just like you do. When I started, I used to do right into the computer's sound card, just in the line in or the mic in, and it was driving me nuts. I would get feedback, I would get dirty audio, I would run comparison results just to see what the dirt was in the signal, and again and again, the USB device beat the audio drivers or the audio cards on the computers hands down over and over again. So I just have completely sworn off using a line in. And I'm totally the other way. I only recommend using a USB input now for audio.
And there's certainly something to be said, like especially if you've got ground loop in your building, you're going to have a hum coming off of the sound. Now, we've got really good power. Everything's on UPSs. We've got everything isolated, so we don't get any of that.
That's
so
good.
it's we're able to do that on the cheap. Yeah, so that's something. If you're getting a lot of hum, then the external will definitely do better. And something about balanced connections as well, being able to go, because now things are so low latency. So USB is a low latency device. USB audio is not going to be using a whole lot of CPU. Video, on the other hand, is. So there are two sides to that for sure.
Yeah, well, the nice thing is the sound card. If you're on the cheap, go with that. You're right, because you can pick up little cheap USB adapters, and it's a $7 test. Just it has the same inputs as your sound card, and so you order those on Amazon or whatever. And then if you like the audio coming in from the USB device, or you like the audio coming from your sound card, either one, go for it. It's not going to cost you an arm or leg. And the great thing is that last little step into the computer is the easy part, and then everything up the chain from there, you can pick up great old mixers for $100 or $50. You can, Behringers are super cheap and great. I love Behringers.
Behringer's great for that because they make a really good device, but it's really, really cheap.
And then if you want to skip that, Behringer actually has the USB right into. They have the interface.
Some of them do. Yes.
Now
ours is quite a bit bigger form factor.
So I hear they sometimes will drop out sometimes. So because they'll draw too much wattage. So again, look for an independently powered one if you can, or put them on a hub that's independently powered, and you might save yourself a headache there.
Now, what I've done for our viewer who was asking about the camera shots and things, what I've done is I've simply added my camera that I'm currently on to this shot underneath of my screen capture. So I've had to do that because I want to show you how I edit the screen capture, and I can't do that here because this is the active shot. So just a thing about doing live video. So can you guys see could you pan so that they can see the left-hand side, my configuration window? Maybe I can make that. So I'm going to just drag my screen over, and there's a bit of a latency, so I'm just waiting for that to catch up to me so that I can you guys see that shot layers?
It works fine, yeah.
Okay, so if I now bring up my capture card properties, I can see I'm just running 1080p right now, and if I scroll down here, you can kind of see how things are set up. So what I do when I pull in my camera, so once I've confirmed that it's pulling in the full resolution, so I just look there and I just leave things as they are. I don't deinterlace the video because it's progressive scan. If I had a interlaced like 1080i source or something like that, you'd want to deinterlace that, but we don't need to do that with a progressive scan source. Then I hop over here and I just go scale to fit, and that creates my first shot, which would be that camera there. So then from there, I right click and I go duplicate shot, and now I've got a second shot with that same source, and making sure that that's selected. Now what I'll do is, because I've got a 4K camera, I can scale in, I can zoom in, and then reposition that camera. And I know you can't see the picture, but you get the idea. So what I'm able to do then is I'm effectively able to create zoomed in profiles at 1080p, because remember that a 4K camera can handle 4 times 1080p. So I can zoom in to a quarter of that shot and it's lossless. So and you've probably seen my videos about that, but it's a really cool effect. It's a really great way to turn one 4K camera into 4 cameras or 10 cameras or however you want to do it. We usually zoom in on products and everything, and all from a single camera. So again, keeping it on the cheap, it's a more expensive camera, but I only need one of them to create multiple shots. And Wirecast gives me the capability of doing smooth transitions as well. So if you'd like, you can set it to a fade transition between them, and it will actually slide the camera shot from zoom to zoom. So
yeah. No, that's great.
Really,
so that was my question: whether you were using them at their native full 4K in the canvas output, or if it
for what we call our wide shot. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's cool. So yeah, and then you can even bump it a little past 100% scaling too. I mean, do you have a recommended rule? Personally, I don't like to go above 120, but in terms of over scale size, because then I start to think it looks not that great. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You know what I do is I bring up the GNU image manipulation program, and I create a new file that's 1920 by 1080 and just fill the canvas with black, and then I rescale it to full 4K, and then I save that as a ping, and then I use that as my kind of guide to see, you know, how big can I really make this shot, and it's a bit of a lazy, cheap way to do it.
Yeah.
But now I can see, you know, okay, well, what kind of resolution can I get in there and still be pretty lossless? And sometimes I'll zoom in even higher than what would be 1080p on the 4K canvas and get in as far as about 720p, because it's still a really good shot.
Yeah.
And the cameras these days are, you know, they look so good that even at 1080p zoomed in to 720, not a lot of people are going to really catch on to the fact that it is getting a little bit grainy at that point.
That's awesome. That's a great tip. So, okay, last piece that we really need to get out here, computers. Where do people shop for computers on the cheap for broadcast?
Oh, wow. That's tough. That's really tough, because if you've got the budget, like if I had the budget when I was starting this thing out, I would have just gone to like high-end HP workstation or something, you know, or, you know, better yet, go to like Nextech and get something that's like pre-built and ready to go. Something that's like out of the box broadcast ready, but that's not me. That's not where I was at. So for me, it was bringing in parts, and it was like, hey, let's make a video series out of the computer build. And so it was really, you know, what was available at the time that was a reasonable price, and built it ourselves. So where do you get parts?
Everywhere you can get them. Friends,
like, I mean, if
family. Like if someone's getting rid of that nice GPU that they don't need anymore, but it's only a year or two old.
Yeah, right. I look at, you know, I look at future readiness, and that's that's a testament to that is the fact that we're still using the computer that we built 10 years ago. What?
Yeah, that's
like really.
crazy.
So because I built it so future ready, it has 4 PCI Express lanes on the motherboard. So I pulled out the old hard drives because they were too slow for 1080p, and we upgraded to SSD. That was no problem, but then we found that was too slow for what we were doing, because we started using Wirecast's capabilities to be able to record all camera shots raw, and so then we upgraded to a Kingston PCI Express M.2 controller, which is like 4 times faster than the fastest SSD. So planning ahead by being future ready, it keeps your costs down year over year. So, you know, from a builder's perspective, it's really just looking at, okay, I'm going to go with good high-end, you know, I'm not looking at cheap. Honestly, I'm not looking at cheap as in dollars value for things like storage and RAM. Like I went straight to Kingston. That's the way I'm doing it. I went straight to a good Intel processor at the time, which was overclockable. So I paid extra to get the K series so that I could overclock it. I paid extra for good capture devices. I paid extra. So it's not cheap in the short term. It's cheap in the long term because I've planned ahead and said, okay, this thing's going to last a lot longer than going and buying a cheaper computer that's only going to last for 3 years, and then I've got to replace it.
Right. You got to drop it made $1,000 or $2,000 on a computer that you just gonna have to do again, or mod so much that you're gonna keep spending more and more money.
It's a tough thing because I mean, if you can build your own, then you're going to save money, plain and simple. But it takes a lot of work, but if you can't, then I would be looking at a workstation. Always make sure you've got redundant storage. If I ever had a hard drive crash and it's got videos on it, where are those videos now? I have about, I don't know, 9 hard drives in the system. I've got a whole bunch of SSDs, and then I've got the M.2 PCI Express controller, and then I've got an external RAID 1 that backs everything up. So
where do you like to shop? Do you like Newegg, Amazon? Do you like certain sites you really recommend?
We're partnered with Newegg, Amazon, B&H Photo Video. So this is another way that you can do things on the cheap, is to partner with these companies so that when I say, go to B&H, if you go there through our links, cat5.tv/BH, then it actually gives a kickback to us, for example, right? We have the same setup with Amazon. We have the same setup with Newegg. So all of these places are great. Newegg is probably the cheapest place to get hard drives, I would say, but they have a lousy affiliate rate, so we don't make a lot of money off of that. But for me personally, Newegg is probably the first place I'm going to hit for hard drive prices. But that said, Amazon prices for hard drives have come way down over the past couple of years. So Amazon is really becoming my go-to place for a lot of stuff. Canada Computers here in Canada is also a good spot, and it's a nice kind of brick and mortar store where you can walk into it, like Tiger Direct, for example, and they have a lot of merch, so you can try things out, see what they look like, But really, it's you've got to know what you're shopping for.
Yeah.
B&H for cameras, B&H also for backdrops, lighting, things like that. We use soft boxes here at the studio, so we've got multiple soft boxes on us at all times. B&H is the place to shop for those kinds of things, muslin backdrops and stands and things, cameras, audio controllers, that kind of stuff. But hard drives, computer peripherals, I'm probably looking at Canada Computers, B&H, Amazon or Newegg.
Newegg, yeah.
I think. So, I mean, that's wherever you get a good deal, right?
Yeah.
Look at their return policies and exchange policies, because if something goes wrong, I did have a hard drive come from Newegg that was out of the box bad, and I just got a replacement. It was easy.
So, okay, I know we're a little over time here, but I just wanted to catch the last pieces of the chain here so we can get some, because, we've obviously had some interruptions and wanted to answer questions, but the last piece of this is your internet connectivity. Are there any, do you have any thoughts or recommendations on jetpacks, on if you're not necessarily going with your local provider, you want to go with some sort of a USB device or something like that? Do you have any thoughts on recommended things? Get the best carrier in your area?
Oh man, that would be a great thing to have, because looking at the internet piece, if you decide to rent a studio and you find a great deal on a building, call the local ISPs first and ask them what they offer. Because when we rented this space, we found out after 2 months of renovations that there was no internet in the area. DSL, that was it. So our only choice has been, we put up a tower and we've got LTE internet, and it's just single. We don't have enough ISPs out here. Everybody shares the same networks.
Right.
So even if I was set up with multiple different service providers,
you'd still be limited
they're
to one.
Pulling from the same towers. So if they're down, they're down. Everybody's down. So that's probably why we've had a couple of dropouts even on my camera tonight, and it's been pretty faithful. But it is what it is. It's LTE. We get about 24 megabits up and down. That's not so bad. It's great for convenience when I go to the cottage and I need to do the broadcast from there. It's brilliant for that, but it is not perfectly reliable. So we always record locally in HD. And then that way, if we drop a feed, if we lose a connection, the viewers know, just refresh or just stick around, and then we'll upload the video to YouTube, to our own website, to Vimeo after the fact. So what do I recommend? Anything other than what we have. If you have a studio space, fiber's the way to go, obviously. What else can I tell you?
Yeah. No, I think it's a good,
with 10 different
point.
connections.
So the way it's connected to you at the moment, is it just a USB device into the computer? How are you doing
USB?
I'm curious. Well, I mean, I'm just yeah.
No, I picked up a Netgear, an older 4G router that has. I specifically went with the older model because it had the SMC connectors for external antennas. So then I was able to connect it to the tower up front. So we could have it here in the studio, but have the tower up front pointed at the actual LTE tower. So that's just like an internet modem basically that connects to LTE. It's got a SIM card plugged into the modem, and then it goes out to my gigabit switch, and everything's connected in through Ethernet. So
got it.
So that's how it goes. So that, in that regard, if internet goes down, because LTE does go down, everything else stays up. So we continue broadcasting even when things are down, and then the video goes up after the show, and you know, at least we've got that fail safe, as long as we're not doing like a live demo or an interview at that time. But I think that's what you run into. Like if you're doing CES and you're trying to broadcast live, you're going to run into those kinds of snags as well.
Oh yeah.
Same kind of thing. When we do an in the field gig, if we're sitting down, we've rented a hall and we're going to do like a live audience demo or something. We always try to find a venue that has good, solid internet. We look for 20 megabits upstream. Anything under that, we're going to be buffering or having some trouble with the feed. So because we're HD.
Yeah, there you go. Well, this is fantastic. So some great advice, Robbie, you've offered on live streaming on a budget, from cameras to capture cards to computers, all the way into your internet a little bit, and talking about some of the options there. There's, again, we could talk about this forever. We get to lights, we didn't get to backdrops or studios or props or anything like that. So there's so much more to talk about. I think we're going to have a round 2 on this at some point and talk more. But Robbie, I want to thank you so much for staying a little long with us today and really diving in. And I always love nerding out with fellow nerds, so thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrew.
So where can you find more information on Robbie? I think we got it right up there on the screen. Thank you, Deborah Lee, for throwing that up. Robbie, anything else you want to say about where folks can find you or what's going on, how the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, my final thought is just simply post-process your audio, folks. Post-process your audio. Look at Auphonic. Auphonic is definitely a great thing to add to your mix. Check out our website, Category5.tv. Lots of great stuff there. We've been branching out into other shows and created a bit of a video network. Everything's free. I give it away. It's yours. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me off of that website. You can download our shows. You can stream them off our website. You can subscribe to us on any number of platforms.
When do you go live?
And I look forward to getting to know you. My show, Technology TV, is every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. And then, of course, we've got New Every Day, which is a faith broadcast every Friday morning. We've got a couple of other shows throughout the week as well.
Cool. Well, the whole Category 5 network is up there. Go find them. Go check out these shows. They've got a ton of great content for all you guys. And Robbie, thanks so much for coming on the show today. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Andrew. My pleasure. And thanks to everybody who's watching as well. I hope to hear from you.
All right. We'll see you again soon.
Cheers.
All right, so that was Mr. Robbie Ferguson from Category 5 TV, founder and starter of the whole network there. And as you can see, he's grown it into an amazing, tech network and all kinds of other content they have up there. And it's and you can just hear the experience that he has. He's been doing this for so long. He does shows weekly on these topics, and he really is a wealth of information on technology, live streaming, broadcasting, video, audio, computers. You can hear it. He's got the whole skill set. So check him out. Definitely go if you're interested at all in Category 5 and what they've got going on. I encourage you to go to those websites. And thank you guys for watching so long and sticking around. If you're curious about and you want to get notified about where what our upcoming guests are, what our upcoming shows are, we've got an email sign-up list, which is on the screen now. You can go to telestream.net/WirecastLive and sign up, and we'll just send you an email with any upcoming shows, including guests like Robbie. And we also have our social channels ongoing, so feel free to send a tweet or join our Facebook users group or catch the latest live streams and recordings at our YouTube channel or on our Facebook videos channel. So thanks again for watching. Thanks to our partners who make this show possible. They obviously kick in a lot of the technology that we use around the studio and could not do this without them. And then thank you to you, our viewers. And we have another fantastic show for you coming next week. We also have a webinar on Wirecast 9. So if you want to get up to date with the latest information, we will be sending out emails for the registration page for that webinar. That should be in about 2 weeks, Wirecast 9, and we'll go through it in depth. In the meantime, I'll try to offer quick sort of videos or updates, or we'll go into some of the features as we have time. Today we ran a little long, and I appreciate it if you wanted to stick around. It was a fascinating conversation, at least for me, and I appreciate all of you guys who kicked in for the conversation there. Jeff, I noticed you're joining us now, and some of the folks appreciate you being on here. All right, we will be back next week with Terry White, Worldwide Adobe Evangelist, and we'll be talking about some very cool stuff. I actually misannounced that last week on the show. I thought he was going to be on this week, but he'll be joining us next week. And I was very pleased to have Robbie on because we actually had to reschedule with him. We had him planned for earlier this year and just couldn't quite make it work for a number of reasons. So we followed up and had a great show with him. And thank you so much. We'll see you guys next week. I'm going to stop talking now, and I'll see you next Wirecast Live.